Sir Mike Rake, thank you very much for coming down to Bristol. BT is back in profit, suggesting that the restructuring of the global services is paying dividends. What were the main planks of the global services restructuring efforts?
Well,
in your view, what contributed to success?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest problem BT has had was really too much strategy and not enough execution. And I think the original strategy of expanding into global services, developing broadband UK, as we saw fixed line deteriorating, and dealing the regulatory settlement that we had, which required Openreach to be separated from the rest of the business, was the right thing to do. But I think execution, we underestimated the difficulty, particularly in global services, when you're expanding fast in highly complex and technical areas on a global basis. I think basically the company lost control of the cost and delivery issues around that and the contract management issues. And I think it was broader than that. I don't think we were on top of our costs. We weren't on top of our capital expenditure. And what you've seen in the last 18 months is we've got on top of our costs, we've got on top of our capital expenditure, we've got on top of global services, and we've been able to significantly reduce debt, improve significantly our cash flow, and we've been able to simultaneously invest in infrastructure around our fibre optics that's being rolled out. We've been at the same time able to start to increase again our dividends, and all of this I think has contributed to a significant success as we've managed to really reduce the losses in our global services division.
What are the key strategic challenges faced by BT?
Well, I think BT, obviously we live in a very competitive world in telecommunications, particularly in the United Kingdom. We still have a lot of work to do on managing effectively and delivering on our global services businesses from a cost point of view. That we've got to do. We obviously have a significant pension situation. We've got 300,000 deferred and current pensioners who've been inherited by the company from privatisation, and we have to deal with those issues. And obviously we suffered very heavy regulation from the TSR agreement 5-6 years ago, and it's been important to basically BT's been operating with two hands tied behind its back in the UK, and we've now been able to break free of that to some degree. We've got a more sensible regulatory environment, which I think allows us to compete more effectively, and we'll be expanding heavily in retail, in BT Vision, gaining access to sports for the first time. This allows us to package our products properly for the first time, and allow us, which I think would be good of the country, to compete with others in the television area, and at the same time, to make sure people are getting the advanced high-speed broadband that people now regard not just as a necessity, but almost as a utility.
So what are the key growth opportunities then for BT?
I think in growth terms, our major growth area about retail, we believe we're going to expand very fast our BT Vision, so the triple play of broadband, fixed line and television, I think is our big growth opportunity, particularly as we have a fantastic DVD library. We will have access to sport from the autumn of this year, so we'll be able to put together an extremely competitive package. Other areas, broadband is I think we'll get some growth as we roll out fibre, as people really move to get high-speed, reliable fibre is going to make a big difference. That also will be a growth area for us in the future.
What do you see as BT's distinctive competencies?
I think BT's brand is actually about reliability and delivery. We own the country's infrastructure on telecommunications and copper. We're rolling out, and the country needs us to for fibre. And I think you see in global services and other areas, wherever we get in, we always deliver. You see BT very good in a crisis. When you've seen the floods and storms that we've seen over the last 12 months, many times it's the BT engineers who are in the forefront of really dealing with extremely difficult and often dangerous situations to restore, telecommunications capability. I think you see on areas like the National Health Service contract, BT is one of the providers who didn't walk away, who stuck in and got it done and delivered some pretty valuable IT networks for the National Health Service.
How does BT deal with the rapid pace of innovation in the sector?
Yeah, well, I think, BT has several thousand research scientists. We continuously invest in innovation. We have in Suffolk and Martlesham some very advanced research capabilities which are used in many different respects. But it is always, a challenge of a very large company is to make sure that you create an environment where innovation is encouraged, and you have to, through that, be able to move much more quickly to delivery of clever ideas. We've got to be more agile than a company like BT has historically been, which means getting the culture right. And you've also got to be quicker on your feet. You know, if you start with new products, new areas, new services, you've got to be quick to get them to market, and you've got to be pretty quick to stop them if you think they're not going to work.
Now, you mentioned being quicker on your feet. What's the impact of the pension hole on BT's strategic flexibility?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly at the moment it's a big overhang on the share price. We worked very hard with our pension trustees to agree a deficiency which we think is, you know, the solvency deficiency, which we think is actually far greater than it will prove to be. We've got a plan to deal with that. We're putting an extra £500 million a year into the pension scheme. We can really afford that. But we haven't yet been able to get the regulator to approve of these schemes, which has been very frustrating, obviously, for the company, and actually just as frustrating for the trustees, because this creates an uncertainty which, but we think, you know, common sense prevails. We'll soon hopefully get clearance on our pension fund deficit and get on with clearing it.
What do you see as the key challenges facing the UK economy in terms of employment and skills?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it's a very good question. There's absolutely no doubt that in the last 10, 12 years, virtually all the growth in employment has been in the public sector. That is actually very unhealthy. In some parts of the United Kingdom, we have 65, 70% people working in the public sector. It's unsustainable. I think that employers have learned in this last downturn, private sector employers, that it was important not to go on mass redundancies, but create much more flexible working patterns, because they've seen that in the past, if you cut too hard, too fast, you know, you really damage your ability for the recovery. What, of course, that means is as people have put on short-time working, as the motor industry, for example, has improved, it takes a while for new employment to come because you'll take back the capacity you had. Now I think inevitably and necessarily we're going to see a significant increase in public sector unemployment, and it's going to be the need for the government to encourage the private sector in order that we can move some of this GDP growth from the state sector to the public sector. And unfortunately, you know, we came into this downturn at the peak of the longest period of upturn with a massive amount of debt. And that, of course, made the country have much less flexibility than it otherwise would have had. And therefore, the public deficit has been a huge mistake in terms of giving the country the flexibility it needs. And unfortunately, I don't see any other option, because if we don't cut quickly, others will come in and do it for us, as we've seen with Greece. We have the biggest percentage deficit to GDP of any country in the OECD right now, and we have to be seen to be getting on with it. It's going to be very painful, and we've got to also at the same time have the courage to do the right things, and that is not about increasing direct taxation and business taxation, about it's encouraging business. It may well mean increasing indirect taxation, and it will mean really significant cutbacks in the public sector across all areas, including back office costs of National Health Service and other. Nothing should be exempt from this review.